Well, thank you so much for coming. And also, we have an incredible panel for you today. The topic about innovation in humanitarian interventions specifically relates to so many sectors. And we heard in the beginning panel that the World Innovation or the World Humanitarian Summit is actually going to be having possibly 3 pillars, except education was not one of them. So I'm thrilled that we have with us today those who are actually giving us some on-the-ground experience and some top-level policy conversations as well. We're going to be running this very interactively. I just want to give you the format, quickly brief introductions, then each one is going to speak for about 5 minutes because of the time difference and the constraints, because we're going to end at 3:30. And they're going to be talking about this 4-part topology to describe innovation in education. That was a product of Garcia work with the OECD, in which we're talking about product innovation, process innovation, market innovation, and organizational innovation. And they're going to be speaking to those examples. After that, we're going to open it up to the floor, and since I now know who you are and what you do, I'm not even going to wait for a hand, possibly, and just kind of reach out and say, it's your turn. Just briefly, my name is Andy Cunningham. I am a doctoral student at St. Anthony's College here at Oxford in the Department of Education. And I also am working with the Education Above All Foundation, which is Her Highness's initiative to get 10 million out-of-school kids into school in the next 2 years. So that's my introduction. Oisin, would you like to go?
Hi, good afternoon. My name is Oisin Walton. I'm Instant Network Program Manager at Vodafone Foundation. In 2 seconds, Instant Network is basically a program where we provide communications in emergencies. So we deploy mobile networks and provide free communications. And about 2 years ago, we moved into supporting UNHCR and the education unit and the innovation unit at UNHCR to support education in refugee camps. And the program is really combining funding, technology, and employee expertise.
Great. Jackie?
Perfect. So, hi everyone. My name is Jackie Strecker. I'm the Learn Lab manager at UNHCR, which, as Oisin mentioned, is a joint initiative between the education unit, which sits within the Division of International Protection, along with the UNHCR Innovation. So it started about 2.5 years ago with the goal of looking at how we could expand and enhance access to education and really looking at providing relevant and quality education to refugees and displaced communities. So I was given the mandate of basically creating an enabling environment, being able to connect with different partners, with groups on the ground, many of you reflected here, and looking at ways that we could stimulate change within how UNHCR approaches education.
Great. And Eugenie?
Good afternoon. My name is Eugenie Mukanda Isenga. I am a Rwandan refugee living in Uganda. I previously worked as a teacher and marketing in a larger company. By now I am working with the NGO, Catholic NGO called the Jesuit Refugee Service in Uganda. I am teaching art and craft, and I'm teaching art and craft in refugees in urban setting to improve their livelihood. And my work involves new art, craft, and design, and sharing the skills with my fellow refugees and my students. So far, I have trained 211 students, and also I founded my personal business to try and help my fellow refugees. Thank you.
Well, we also have to give Eugenie a round of applause because is the sign off to the right? She made that and brought it as a gift to the conference. So as we're going to move into this 4-part topology, I want us as an audience to be thinking about three questions that maybe we can talk about afterwards. And they're surrounding issues of longevity of innovation. So how does it sustained over time? The second is fecundity. So can other people do it in different contexts? And then finally, copy fidelity. So can it be replicated and still actually have the same purpose and the same motivations behind it, but maybe have a contextualized version? So I want to hand it over to first Jackie to talk to us what your interpretation is about product innovation in the context of education. And the theme, I think, throughout this is to identify promising avenues and blind alleyways rather than successes and challenges. So try to give us a little bit of the success and the avenues we want to travel down and say, that's a dead end, keep moving on. So Jackie, over to you.
Sounds good. Well, coming from an education background, if I can, I'd just like to hear from the audience, what do you think some of the most promising product innovations are? So I don't want descriptions, I just want you to call out if you know of a product innovation within the education sphere that you would consider as something that's truly innovative.
Open education resources.
So OERs. Okay, training toolkits, OERs. Crickets. Perfect. Yeah, Ideas Box by Libraries Without Borders. Yep. Sorry?
No, I didn't say it yet. Well, the street project on mobile applications.
Okay, mobile.
Having said that, we have already developed it in mobile under the ICT umbrella, and we're just doing it with street project.
Great. So a range of different mobile apps. I heard one more. No? All right. So first, a big thank you for Andy for providing actually the structure of this session. I found it quite interesting to really focus on product innovations, largely because I'm more interested in the process and process innovations, largely because I think even when you look at a product innovation, you have to consider the ecosystem. And so when we look at this blind alleyways, I think it's often because the concept is there, but they're not taking into consideration the ecosystem. So I've tried to pull up a couple of examples of different product innovations, not all ones that UNHCR Innovation is supporting, because that would be too biased. But the first one is the Tutu desk. And I wanted to bring this up because it's an innovation with regards to infrastructure. It's basically a desk that children can have that they situate on their lap. It's made of a thick plastic, or you can make it out of plywood. And basically it gives children a sturdy structure that they can write on. So instead of having these desks, and I was part of a session earlier where in Kasulu, Tanzania, we talked about having 6 kids to a desk, which is smaller than this table. Here you have something that is easy to manufacture, can be manufactured locally, is something that you can actually contextualize in the way that the surface of it, people can actually design around either educational messages or this periodic table, a multiplication table, different tools that you can really sort of contextualize for your context, and it's something that's quite simple. So this has won several different innovation awards. It's been tried out in the Kakuma refugee camp and in various other development settings, and again is sort of a very simple product innovation, but really looked at what was the challenge on the ground, which was the fact that we just couldn't manufacture desks in a lot of these environments, and we didn't have the budget to do it, and sort of looked at reverse engineering. And so this was actually designed looking at how we could take the challenge of educational infrastructure and look at implementing. They also took into consideration the ecosystem, so working with designing this with the classroom setting and with different teachers and students to see how it would be used. So it can be used if a child is sitting in a chair or if they're sitting cross-legged on the floor. So just an interesting, because I think we often, in our conversation already, lended towards the technology side. I wanted to start with a product innovation that is really sort of divergent from that. The next ones that I want to speak about build on these ideas of open educational resources. And again, I'm going to approach this from two angles, because one of the things that for me has been a little bit troubling in a lot of the conversations that I've engaged in the last couple of years, especially around the Syrian crisis, has been a rhetoric around looking at a universal refugee curriculum. So people actually considering, why don't, especially at a tertiary level, why don't you just make, or a secondary level, a refugee education curriculum? You could have UNESCO certify it. You know, it could be a curriculum that everyone sort of checks off the box, and no matter in what context, it could be deployed. As educationalists sitting in this room, as you guys identified yourself as, you know that curriculum is something that's very much tied to culture. And what we've recognized from the community and engaging with the community is they don't want something that's specifically tailored for refugees. They really want accreditation, they want recognition, but they want something that's relevant within the context. And there's more similarities within the context that they're situated, more than with being a label of a refugee. And so on the contrast of this, something that's been really exciting has been the work of our partners that are working in the tertiary education space to actually create products that are courses that are contextualized at a higher education level, but lead to a degree. So we've got the University of Geneva that's in the room. They've been actually looking at creating a MOOC that's designed for refugees, but is not a refugee MOOC. So what they started with was taking an evidence base of actually doing a case study by taking an open educational resource, a course by Coursera, and actually Barbara had the pleasure, if I can say that, of taking the course with 2 refugees and actually learning from their experience of what were the challenges in the different structures that actually blocked them from really engaging with this OER. And then from there was able to reverse engineer in a lot of ways, thinking through how we can make sure that these resources that have so much potential are designed with a refugee in mind, but is a course that could be open to anyone. So as a quick flag, she'll be presenting on this in the panel session after the break. So if you want to learn more, please follow up. It's Barbara Moser with the University of Geneva. But just to say that this has been replicated. So the diagram you see behind is one of our partners, the Australian Catholic University, that's working on the Thai-Burma border. These Burmese refugees were actually taking a course with the University of York out of Toronto. And it was a course that the students did together, but the course itself was engineered to actually facilitate this exchange and really making sure that it was contextualized and they weren't asked to, in this camp context, you know, go to Starbucks and observe human interaction, which has been a requirement in other courses that I've seen in camp contexts. So the other one that was touched on was sort of the mobile app application. And I think there's a range of these that have looked at literacy, that have looked at everything from data EMIS systems, so education management systems, and being able to send on that data, something that I know Andy has worked some time on with UNICEF. And I think mobile and the product innovations around mobile have huge potential. But again, you have to take into consideration the ecosystem. So I'm going to leave that as a lingering thought because I know there are several of you in the room that are working on these that can also speak to your experiences with how you really make sure you encourage that behavioral change and that uptake, even if you've got a great product. I think the times of thinking that if you build it, they will come have dissolved. I think from the tech for dev space, people have really moved past this idea of thinking of technology as neutral, and I think that's something that's embraced when we look across product innovations. The last one I'll bring up, because it was also mentioned, is the ideas box and some of these ideas around classroom kits. So we've partnered with Libraries Without Borders to prototype the ideas box, which is this concept of how can you deploy a library in any context, whether it be a refugee context or a marginalized community in France, and have a resource that could be localized, could be contextualized for those environments, and really is a tool that can be flexible. So this has gone through lots of iterations, and we actually had a workshop yesterday, which was a hack the box session, where we got together a lot of our partners to actually look at how we could refine this. When we worked with Vodafone Foundation on building up the Instant Network School program, one of the first things that I kind of said was, I don't want to build another classroom kit or school in a box. And inevitably, that's what we ended up doing. The reason why we did this was because of the ecosystem on the ground. We started off with a process of actually trying to have all of the parts either be procured locally, working through the innovation system, but it was just very difficult. UNHCR systems, as we've heard, are bureaucratic. You guys have worked with us, you know that. And it was really, really hard from the logistical side to actually get all of the resources in place, to get content that was localized, but in a way that would actually be manageable for teachers, for students to be able to interact. And so ultimately, we ended up saying, learning from the experience, learning from the ecosystem that we were working within, we actually have to take a different model. And this was responding to the challenge of not only the procurement piece, but also to UNHCR's funding cycle, and that it's also quite easy for us to receive in-kind donations as opposed to cash and making purchases. So again, the idea behind the kit itself was not the model of, we want to create this, but was really responding to the ecosystem and the challenge that we saw on the ground, and recognizing that there were several different kits out there that we tried to learn from, but really saying, okay, if this is our goal of what we want to produce, how can we do it in a way that responds to the environment and the system that we're working in? And I think that is the key for product innovations. Again, I often go to educational conferences, and whether it's the e-learning Africa conference or others, you often see the next digital classroom kit that someone has produced. And all of them have their benefits and have their weaknesses, and I really think it's about looking at that ecosystem, looking at what the challenges they're responding to, and really trying to see how you can integrate. So the product innovation is one piece of it, but I think Eugenie will really expand when we start to look at process innovations, which I think are, inherent in making any of these really come to life. So I'll stop there.
Thank you. What's missing in these pictures, I mean, this one actually has it, I don't know, but are the teachers. So those who actually receive these products. You talk about an ecosystem that seems to be driven by in-kind donations or what the funding cycle is for UNHCR. When do these products arrive? Are they in the middle of the school year? Is there a selection process, an application process? What is the role of teachers and school leaders in actually translating these products into, as you rightly said, into processes that work for learning?
Absolutely. Well, I think teachers are the most important ingredient. Again, I think the field in terms of Tech for Ed has learned a lot in terms of the fact that technology will never replace teachers. Product innovations, whatever they are, will never replace teachers, and that they are the key ingredient for really making sure that whatever the resource is, does have that uptake. But it's not just the teachers, it's the school principals, the school management, it's the entire education system, it's the PTAs. So one of the things that we've tried to do at UNHCR Innovation is really take things from a design process. So even before the delivery piece of it, it's actually working with the community to design what this would look like. So before any of the technology comes in, it's about looking at what the vision is for education, how these resources can respond if they are going to be physical resources, but how can you look at what the challenges are that the community is facing and design with them.
What does that mean, design with them? I mean, is it bringing people to a hotel and having a workshop, or is it, I'm trying to press you on that. Tell me, how do you design something that the teachers have no idea what this is and expect them to say, yeah, let's put tablets with that? I mean, what do you mean by participation there?
So, and I think some of you were at the workshop that was facilitated earlier by Becky and Ahmed. But one of the things that we did actually within Tanzania around this program was we did have a design session with the community. So we brought together teachers, we brought together parents, we brought together students, both those that were in school and out of school youth, and we brought together partners. And the first thing that we did within the context of Tanzania, before we actually said, okay, we're here from Vodafone Foundation and UNHCR to bring ICTs into the education program, we said, what's your vision for education? So they drew out their visions and then presented back on them in terms of what their goals were. The next exercise that we did was we said, what is your ideal learning environment? And what was interesting was within all of the drawings, ICTs were reflected. There was either a computer lab or there was some compilation of actually having access to ICTs. So the idea of it was already there. One thing I've really recognized within UNHCR is a lot of people carry with them preconceived notions of something that they've seen once. So also this idea, and this is something that we've really tried to transition around within UNHCR, this idea of building a computer resource center that has desktop computers, that has all of these resources, is a preconceived notion in a lot of people's minds when they think about being able to use technology. And so then it was a process of actually engaging with them to pull that apart a little bit more, to look at what the challenges were that they had, actually give them some of the resources so that they could play with it and start to brainstorm how they thought it could be integrated, getting them to think about who are the different users within your context. So not just the people represented there, but who are the people that are elderly within the community, and would they have access to this, yes or no? If no, why? How could we enhance their access?
That's perfect.
Yeah.
We're just going to move on.
Yes.
Hopefully that's triggered some more questions for the Q&A. So I would like to transition to Eugenie and your conceptions of process innovation from your own personal experience that is fairly rich to share with the group. So over to you.
Thank you. As I said, I am a part of a team of Jesuit Refugee Service Uganda. We conduct education for adult training, livelihood skills. This includes 6 classes, where is the hairdressing, carpentry, catering, tailoring, English class, and in my class, which is teaching art and craft. I believe that the process innovation has been created in 2 levels. First, GLS has created the permanent training. And the second, I personally try to develop new ways of working in my class. The program at GLS is unique in 4 ways. First, it's the only in Uganda organization who is training refugees who has the permanent training. Means we train rather than short one of class, and therefore reaches to many refugees over an extended period of time. Second, GLS was one of the first organizations to employ refugees. At GLS, we are 2. One's teaching English class, also me in art and craft. Third, any training GLS gives is combining with business training, which we do in cooperation with GLS and the Makerere University branch of a business school, together with the Centenary Bank Uganda. Fourth, GLS offers smaller loans, grants to refugees, yet it's not enough, just few people they get because of the capacity, others they don't get, but they try as they can to give smaller loans. In my class, I'm testing out new ways to deliver training that is meaningful, and we stay with my students in the long time.
Do you want to show any pictures?
Yes.
Okay.
I can.
Yeah.
That is me in my office. Means that GRS is giving refugees job. That is my workshop where I display my product my students make. But this one is for 2013. Now we are on another level. This one is 2013. Here is me with my graduate. In a year, I train 4 classes. Each class is 20, means per year I train 80 students per year. That is the day of graduation. That is the part of the part of the class. They were happy, even if challenges are there. That is again the team. Of course, we trained them, but the challenge are after training, what can we do? GRS doesn't have the total capacity to help refugees to get smaller loans. I hope that's... So, I can say some of the things that I have developed. When I started in 2011 with GLS, my contract was signed that I have to train how to make paper necklace, paper jewelries. But after that, now I developed 11 subjects, which I will show you later. I set up a display room at my office where everyone can come and see what refugees do, if they learn what they make. I display them in my office. If you come to GRS Uganda, please, I am inviting you to come and visit us. Another one, I support one by one of my students to make a follow-up after training, to advise them, and to stand with them. Not that I give them just the skills, but as you know, the life of refugees, skills is not enough. I play that role to accompany them after class, even if not much we do. I learned that an important part of education is about behavior change. I support my students to have positive attitude.
Now tell me, Eugenie, you said something really interesting. You said you developed new subjects. So you were given a contract, I want to do paper bead necklaces, and that's it. So what are these 11 subjects?
Actually, it started in just 2011 in February. The contract was the new pilot project, how to teach refugees to self-reliance. As just the ideas they have is how to make papers, necklaces, and the jewelries. But when they give you, they gave me a job, I saw that that is not enough. I used it to go out to learn from crafty people of Uganda, also to get other knowledge from my colleague refugees. Then I combine, then I see what can make sense and can be important to refugees. Because since 2011 until now, I hope so necklaces could not be useful up to now. It's why maybe I can show you briefly what, according to the 11 subject I'm saying, I like to show you some of products I make in case.
Do we think, as you get ready, do we think we know these 10 subjects or 11 subjects? Like, just yell out some subjects that you think beyond paper beads and jewelry. What kind of subjects would you imagine? Financial literacy, okay. Let's go, guys. I'm in. Business, okay. English, yeah.
Critical thinking skills.
Great, critical thinking. Numeracy, so he's getting a +2 bonus point. Notes are being taken for the pub quiz later, so these are bonus rounds. Any more guesses on this side? Communication skills. Marketing. All right. Engineering. Are we at all close?
No.
Oh.
Okay, thank you for all of you, the answers you has given earlier. You may say are nice, but according to the subject I'm teaching, are different with what you say. In the beginning, I said that GLS, we have 60 classes. One is for hairdressing, carpentry, tailoring. We have English class. We have catering and the mining, which is the art and the craft. If I'm talking about the LFA subject is just for my class only. So I ask you a question. What do you think about those 11 subjects? That is the clear question, maybe.
So she's giving you another chance. So subjects within arts and crafts, I think is what you're asking.
Yes.
Okay, so let's try again, I guess. All right, so what do we think? Ceramics, okay. Fabric design. There's many PhD students in here, come on.
Please, you reply.
Shoes. Beading. Woodworks. Oh. Well, it's not that hard, guys.
Oh my God.
All right, so what's
Okay.
the answer? What are the answers?
Yeah, for Lilith, very nice. You say ceramic, fabric items, wooden product, shoes. Yes, these. So now let's show you some of them that maybe you can know clearly what I am teaching, what I am helping. I am using to help my fellow refugees, which is now I may see all of us we're gathering here that we can just see how humanitarian innovation can help refugees and the other people. I think that is.
I'm ready to see this. I haven't seen it yet. It's here. It was so tempting for me to reach in, but.
Okay.
Oh.
In my subject, I am teaching what is called tie and dye. Tie and dye, I think so, all of you know. But a part of the material, we can make, those are, how do you call it?
Hot mints. Yeah.
In the kitchen, you can use them.
Love it. Did they come apart or no? I'm just kidding.
Okay, a part of, I didn't bring in necklaces, but those are paper bags, money pass for papers. Means if you make paper products, we can produce bags, small or big. You can make necklaces, earrings, and bracelets. Okay, we can make different jewelries. Those are fabric earrings, made by my class. Those. Okay, if I say maybe kind of manufactured necklaces, we buy beads from China, then you can make like this band where I'm wearing, these earrings I'm wearing, I'm the one who made them. I didn't buy anyway. Again, a part of the lesson for tie and dye, I can make the tablecloths, then I put the napkins. If you can put on the eating table, it is very beautiful.
I think one more, and then we're gonna. Yeah.
This is shoes. The person who says shoes is the right person. I can make fabric bags, then I decorate with the paper beads.
As you're showing the last one, Eugenie, my question to you is, you were given a curriculum to learn how to do paper beads. And yet you know how to do this. How did you go about learning how to do this?
If we are talking innovation, I think so it is to make new things, to improve what we are doing. So I can say that also it is in the way of innovation, because of the work, if you can't improve, just you have to remain the same. So it's why I tried to go in other people who are doing art and craft, then I copy from there, then I come and I teach others. It's why I make that curriculum of 11 subjects. Even now I'm still learning that in the future I will not remain the same on those ones. I have to work as the technology is moving on, everything. Also many craft I have to improve according to the time.
That is pretty inspiring of what we can learn actually how to do. I think you're bringing up a very, very important issue, and as we transition to the last one, maybe you can relate to this a little bit. But it seems there's so much work that is put into creating the perfect manual or creating the perfect curriculum. And yet, when it's finished, it's not enough. And I think your example gives us a challenge to think about what are the programs that are being designed and how can the learning literally be flipped to the learner rather than this education 1.0 of people can only receive instead of talking back and designing on their own. So this, I think, is a great present. I really appreciate these. But thank you so much. And can we give Eugenie a round of applause? We're doing great on time. So let's move to our last speaker, and then I'm going to open it up actually to the floor. Over to you, Oshin. Do you want the clicker? I mean, there's a couple coming up.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay. So, just before I started, I'll tell you a bit about where I'm coming from. And so I used to work for an NGO called Télécom Sans Frontières, TSF. I worked for them for about 7 years. And I joined Vodafone Foundation about 4 years ago. And the reason why I joined is because I really wanted to bridge the gap between corporates and NGOs. I really believe that there's huge potential within companies to make a difference, and there's huge goodwill. There are people in companies, good people, bad people, as anywhere, including in humanitarian sector, etc. But I really thought that beyond funding, there was something that companies could actually bring to, as long as there are certain rules. And coming from the NGO sector, understanding, first of all, having certain values that I obviously share with the humanitarian community, and understanding where NGOs and humanitarian organizations in general are coming from helps a lot once you're within a big company, and trying to bring the two together. So literally today what we're doing is we're running a small NGO, to be honest, within Vodafone Foundation. Vodafone Foundation has gone from a checkbook charity, so about 5-6 years ago, Vodafone used to sign checks, so receive proposals traditionally, and sign the checks, which was an easy job, I would imagine, and receive the report at the end of the year, or not. When I joined, we tried to see how we could use our technology, and I'll give you one example where I come from in emergency response. I'm working for TSF. When TSF started, 8 agencies relied in disaster situations on satellite communications. Today, with mobile networks, you can get voice, SMS, data, etc., everything you want. But if it used to be that only 8 agencies could only rely on satellite communications, and then victims of the disaster, when TSF was on the ground or ICRC had to queue to make a phone call, right? And we thought, well, what if we restore the mobile network faster and we set up, we pop-up credit onto people's phones, etc. So not only do you enable aid workers to get communications, victims get communications, and also then it opens a door for aid agencies to communicate with those affected. So there's more and more communication with affectees, and it's a game changer. So I'll leave the emergency response part, focus more on the education. If you ask people when you say innovation, what do they think? They'll probably think 9 times out of 10 either a product or a technology. When in fact, really, and I'm not going to talk to you too much about technology, to be honest. Yes, there is the instant classroom behind, and it wasn't our objective at the beginning, what Jackie said. It was part of the solution. Our approach, so what we do is, so we combine funding, technology, so whether this is networks, devices, software, and employee expertise. We train these employees who are volunteers, so they have a day job. They're trained, so they do hostile environment training. Some of you have probably done it. And then we work with the partners and try and identify obviously some of the challenges they're having, some of the technologies that are available, and see how we can embed the technology into the process. But the technology, again, is just part of the solution. What we try to do with the Instant Network Schools program is traditionally ICT in education has been learning about ICT. So learning how to use a computer, learning Word, learning Excel. Pretty boring stuff, to be honest. What we tried to do is turn it around and say, why don't we use ICT to learn? Again, our approach, as Jackie said, is not to replace teachers with technology. I see a lot of projects where kids are given tablets and they're learning on a tablet without the teacher or very little involvement. I don't think that's the right way to go. It may work in certain situations, but that's really not the way that we think. We try to empower the teachers, so give them the resources. So what did we see? First of all, in the education space, in refugee camps, lack of resources, no internet connection, so they're totally isolated. Average stay of a refugee in a camp, 17 years, so you can imagine staying in a camp and not being connected with the outside world. Limited resources, so the books there are not enough books. Teachers having to draw on a board when actually if they just display the pictures, kids who've never seen a mountain, who've never seen a lake. So you can imagine a teacher trying to draw a lake and giving a sense of what it is. And then we looked at the ICT space, and we said, because the idea was we went with Jackie and UNHCR Innovation and the education units and the partners running the schools, and we tried to see what was happening in the education space, where were the challenges, and then what was happening in the ICT space. What we saw in the ICT space is rooms with computers without power and without internet, so not used. Teacher training on technology, but then they went back to schools where they didn't have any technology. Platforms, and I hear a lot about platforms, etc. Access to platforms, online, it's all in the cloud. Yeah, it's all great, but if you don't have connectivity and you don't have the devices, how are you going to connect to the platform? So what we tried to do is come up with, and that's why technology is just a piece of the solution that we're working with Jackie and her team, is we designed the Instant Network Schools program, which is basically an Instant Network classroom is a room that is refurbished in a school, secondary school, primary schools, and vocational centers as well. So in Dadaab, for example, there are 4 vocational centers who are teaching electricity, hairdressing, etc., who are using the internet and the equipment that we're providing to look at videos on how to, what's the latest trendy hairstyle, how to build a wall, etc. And but we're not just delivering this. This was some of the solution that came later, actually 2 years down the line. What we're doing is we provide power, we provide connectivity, we provide the hardware. So we started with tablets, servers, projectors, etc. It was a bit of a nightmare in terms of procurement, logistics, and we couldn't reach all the schools. What we do is we don't distribute a tablet to every kid. We create a space in the school where the teachers can bring in their class with a coach. And again, the model has evolved over time, where the kids can access the technology, but the teacher can run a more interactive class, and they can also use that space outside classes to prepare for the next class and have the latest resources. So we provide power, connectivity, technology, training, and training is key. And content, but we're using the free content from World Possible and the Rachel, you've probably heard of it, which is an online platform and a local platform, meaning that you can actually download all the content and use it locally. The keys for us are the training and the content. So forget about the tablets, etc. It's great piece of kit. The reason why we did it is one, logistics and procurement, and the other one was that we weren't in all the schools, and some of the schools were saying, why can't we have it? So we said, well, if we put it in a box that's going on wheels and has power and connectivity and all the devices in it, you can actually bring that box and bring the instant network classroom to a place where there's no power, no internet, and you just have 4 walls and a roof, basically. So we were killing 2 birds in one stone, although I love birds, so I hate that, but I never found a better expression. So it was really about procurement, solving an issue. But again, technology is just one part of the solution. We have 18 schools today. What we do is we work very closely with UNHCR, so we deploy on the ground with them. So it's from design of what the instant network classroom is going to look like. We opened our first community center, so we changed a library, using an existing library that was set up in Kikuma, and changed it into a multimedia community center, so where we put an instant classroom, put connectivity, etc.
What's the speed of this connectivity? I mean,
it depends on the camp, on the location, but generally we try and have at least 1 megabyte dedicated for each school.
So now that you see them in the schools, and I'm very interested in the organizational innovation. You've transformed from a checkbook foundation to now a mini NGO. But the NGOs, by contrast, they're on the ground, they're in the classrooms, they're talking constantly with their partners. What is happening in the classroom now that this has been delivered? Because I've heard a lot about procurement, the challenges. What are kids doing on these things? What are teachers doing on these things? Is it Facebook? Or is it beyond that?
When we launched the schools in Dadaab, I was quite surprised that I was amazed that when we did the launch, you had several. So we had 13 schools in Dadaab. And each school had 1 class coming in showing demoing. And for example, there was a blind teacher came in and run a class. It wasn't using our equipment, it was using the connectivity, etc. But he had a special laptop and was running a class like any other teacher, just had sunglasses on. So if you came into the room, you wouldn't notice that he was actually running a class as any other teacher. And we had been talking about how we could, by Handicap International, how we could reach out to kids and teachers with disabilities, etc. And I didn't really have the answer. But what I'm trying to get at is we're providing a technology which is an enabler. What they actually do with it is really up to them, and they always surprise us. Every time we go back, they find a new way of using the technology. The community center, when we were in Kikuma, we were talking to Octopizo, who's a big rapper in Kenya, a big friend of Becky, and he would like to use the instant network classroom to promote youth groups and bands and dancers, etc., on the internet. So what they're going to do is film themselves and broadcast on Facebook, etc. That's a whole new way that we hadn't envisaged at the beginning. And it's outside the school, but in the school, it's a traditional model of the teachers come in, they've prepared their class. Generally, each class in the school has 2-3 hours per week, and there's a rotation, and we try and give access to all classes in the. But it can range from just showing pictures of things that the kids have never seen. It can be doing a quiz on the tablet. So the projector is connected to, the tablet's connected to a projector, and you've got what's the capital of Uganda, what is, a quiz on geography. And yeah, I mean, we don't decide what they actually do. So we provide the technology, we provide some training, and we give them ideas on what it can do. Because again, if you arrive and you say, what are you going to do with the tablet? If they've never seen it before, as you asked Eugenie before, it's very difficult for people to say if they've never seen something. So we give them ideas on how it could be used, but we don't influence the school runs as they usually run, and they decide on what's taught, how the classroom's used, and we don't decide on the content. So I think that's very important. So we provide the training and the basic infrastructure. What they make out of it is really up to them.
So I'm going to count that as market innovation because I want to get to some Q&As. So we've heard on the panel an extraordinary range of platitudes and buzzwords, but I think they actually gave us some specifics as well, which is a testament to your roles and responsibilities. I have a few questions that I'd love to ask, but I want to give you an opportunity if you want to ask directly any of our panel members. Yes, in the front row.
Is it on? Okay. So I'm not from a kind of education background at all, more sort of the politics of refugee policy, and the work that I'm doing in Jordan at the moment is more related to impediments to refugees' working rights. But that has a direct impact upon education because obviously, specific to the Jordanian context, what we've seen a lot of is, when parents aren't able to work, then children drop out of school, they are involved in things like rummaging through scrap, and it has this awful knock-on effect. But also, my understanding of the policy towards schooling Syrians in Jordan at the moment is it's basically failing because you have this system whereby they're supposed to be integrated into Jordanian schools, which is a different curriculum. We've had the return of the two-shift system, which is failing not only Syrians but Jordanians as well because it undermines the whole delivery of education. And that is based upon, in some ways at least, the UN's general policy of avoidance of parallel systems, which we see across UN agencies involved in this type of work. And also complementing that is the fact that under Jordanian law, one of the categories that foreigners are precluded from working in is the category of teaching.
And what's we need a question.
So my question is, and I'm going to talk about this a little bit tomorrow, so if anyone comes to the parallel session, I'm sorry for repeating myself, but what's your opinion? I mean, it's kind of specifically Jackie, I think, but in terms of, do you see the potential for going against this principle of avoidance of parallel systems if it were combined with allowing Syrian teachers to implement the curriculum that was back in Syria, in conjunction with technology like the Instant Classroom or like the Ideas Box? What's your opinion on that? Because this is something that we're kind of conceptualizing at the moment in terms of early stages. Do you think that has the potential to, because we're not supposed to have these parallel systems, but I think in specific cases it needs to be more of a nuanced approach to that specific policy. I think with healthcare, for example, it's clear that people are people with health needs. That doesn't change according to your nationality. But when it comes to really important things like the curriculum and the fact that students will be at different levels, that's something that does need to be considered, I think, with a bit more of a nuance.
Really timely question. I'm going to take 3 more and then we'll just answer them all together. Yep. Sorry, can you just wait for it? Thanks. Great. One more time.
Eugenie, this is specifically for you. I thought it was a great presentation, and I'm very fascinated by your approach. I'm particularly passionate about people doing it as a social educational entrepreneurs and practical project-based skills learning and face-to-face conveying of things that are just very much real-world based. And my question to you is, amongst your students, are there those who stand out in the sense that you feel they would be the next teachers, the next instructors? Do you see that happening in terms of reaching other communities and larger numbers of people? And do you think they would be able to generate an income for themselves by teaching so that they can sustain this as their everyday activity and therefore increase the reach of what they do?
Excellent, thank you. And then if we can keep these quick, I'll take them all and then we'll answer. So here.
Eugenie, it's a question for you as well. I really enjoyed your presentation, thanks very much. And I love the photo of the certificates, when they're holding the certificates at the end of the course. And I wanted to ask, how important is certification for your students? How important is it to have that piece of paper which says, I can now do this skill? Do they use that piece of paper? Does that piece of paper give them access to jobs or not? And are these certificates, do they need to be recognized by other institutions? For example, the professional body of tailors in Uganda or something like this. Is that something that's important to you or not?
Great. And last 2 questions in the back, and then we'll end right where we began.
Again, my name is Erin Heba, and I'm with the University of Geneva. And as a big supporter of many of these innovations, either been involved with or otherwise, we can all see the opportunity and the potential for many of these different innovations. But the big question is, when you're in the field, do you have the data or the evidence to show that it, A, increases access, and B, quality? Because that's in humanitarian work, when you're dealing with numbers, and I know the Syria crisis and the different situations are only at 30% access. How are these technologies improving that, and also the quality perspective? Because that comes with that, the access part.
Great. And the last question. I think that's a really pertinent question in considering the new numbers of out-of-school children that were just produced. Rather than it being 58 million, it's now estimated 59 million out of schools. Of course, the out-of-school children population is based on household census data. Where are the out-of-school children? Usually not in houses, maybe they're in institutional care on the streets. So we could have actually such an underestimate for the actual numbers of access. So I think that's a crucial question for the panel. And finally.
Hi, my name is David. I'm a undergrad student from the Philippines. I work at a student-led nonprofit that focuses on health education. My question is for Ms. Jackie. When it comes to product innovations, context and the ecosystem are king. It is no surprise that many of the innovations are successful. But how do you deal with people who want to replicate your work? The success in one environment ensures success in another. How do you address people who would like to replicate the innovations you guys come up with?
Great. Thank you so much. I think we may actually have time, depending on the shortness of your answers, to take a few more. So let's begin with Jackie. So you have 2 questions, really. One is avoidance of parallel systems. That was the first question. And how do we actually create capacity without replicating something that already exists? Within the context of really not just Syria, but many other countries around the world. And then the second one is, I think you're absolutely right, replication, scaling, but that's a very complicated and political question also in terms of your funding and donors and priorities. So hitting on both of those any way you want.
Great. Well, I'll start, Sean. Yeah. Wonderful. So it's interesting because when we look at the history of UNHCR and the support of education over time, it initially started with setting up a lot of parallel systems. And I think of the context in Chad, where for about 7 years, UNHCR was supporting the Darfurian curriculum. And the amount of money and resources that went into this process, also with regards to accrediting, so bringing over people to make sure, to the point around certification, that not only was the curriculum there, but that children and students and youth were able to actually get accredited degrees, created such a complicated structure that there was tons of resource being pulled in to this, and then at the end of 7 years, there wasn't much to show for it. And so I think one of the other sort of organizational or institutional innovations that we haven't touched upon is some of the work that's being done right now at a policy level around the World Education Forum, around the Sustainable Development Goals. At the Incheon Declaration that happened in Korea in May, it was the first time that displaced communities were actually recognized. So paragraph 11 of this declaration actually recognizes the need for the international community and for states to actually respond and to, in advance, plan for displaced communities. And I think, you know, while it's a high-level piece and it will really depend on how the strategic framework of this actually gets implemented on the ground, but it's the first time that we and UNHCR has been invited to the table to actually be able to lobby states to say, we need to consider more how we actually include refugees. When we look at the fact that it's actually, you know, 20 years now that the average refugee is remaining in a state of refuginess, and we're looking at the fact that we have over 60 million refugees, we don't have the finances to actually sustain a humanitarian response. So we need to look at these different systems. I agree with you that it's nuanced, it has to look at the context, but we need to balance that in terms of actually looking at the fact that a lot of humanitarian crises and displacement aren't short term. So how can we find that bridge? How can we put into place the systems where we can leverage, you know, the ministries and their support on the ground to be able to make sure that education is rigorous, is of quality, where we can ensure that there is accreditation and recognition across a region of these degrees. Again, I mean, there's tons of tensions going on and tons of debates around these, and especially in a context like Syria where you've got differing national curriculums coming out of Syria too, it adds to the complexity. So I think these are all conversations that need to be continually brought up and need to be discussed, but it's based on sort of the history that UNHCR has taken this approach to say, how can we really work with the assets on the ground and really sort of lean on these different systems to make sure that we're able to respond, and respond in a context, a global context, where it doesn't look like emergency situations are going to resolve themselves or dissolve anytime soon. With regards to the scale and replication piece, I think part of this is about looking at the process. So again, and I think it's about even the best product that you have needs integration and needs to be contextualized and needs to be adapted, and you do that with the community on the ground, with all of the different stakeholders. And so I think some of the pieces within that are based on the fact of actually replicating the process and less so the product that you're implementing. We have a lot of questions around this, and I say we as the collective group here, in terms of what it really takes to scale educational innovations. And actually with UNICEF and DFID and UNHCR, we're actually about to launch a scaling accelerator where we want to look at what are innovations that have an impact evaluation, show impact within one site, and are in the process right now of scaling.
And what's that impact?
So impact can be, it depends on the context, but in terms of what have you set out to do, and can you actually measure success against what you were looking to do? So I mean, a lot of the work that Eugenie put forward in terms of showing impact and being able to sort of take these processes and be able to scale, I say scale in the sense of scaling what the educational pedagogies were in terms of the different criteria that were being offered, you know, shows a lot of success. So what we're interested in is less that impact, that success, but how do you actually replicate that? And so what this accelerator is going to be is based on actually doing evaluations. So if anyone's interested, I'm happy to talk more about this, but what we're looking to do is actually giving funding to organizations, so as they're scaling, they can do a developmental evaluation and we can do an impact evaluation, and then look across this cohort of different educational innovations to actually see what are factors that enable scale and inhibit it. So as donors, as UN agencies, as NGOs, as academics, we can actually, at the start of a process, one, manage people's expectations around projects and what one should scale, but also secondly, we can actually look at, from the onset of an investment, what's our long-term goal behind this, and is it hitting off the markers for enabling scale, or where are the roadblocks that we need to start mitigating already?
Excellent. This is going to be speed round. So I'm going to ask you a quick question that's based on those questions. So we had many questions for you, which is not surprising. The first is, of the students that you have, are any of them becoming instructors or have the capacity to do what you do outside of the training program? Is the first question.
Let's start with this.
Okay.
Thank you. The question is very nice and I appreciate. Students I trained, some of them, now they do self-reliance, even if challenges are there. In Uganda, before they used it to make their product, they decide to sell door to door. But in Uganda now we have a challenge that those who have smaller business to work with, they are not allowed. That is the challenge they have, but they make, they sell, just in they have to use the hiding way. GLS, we tried last year to organize some exhibitions, but which is not, it is not working well because we compete with Ugandans and the other people from Kenya, Tanzania, who has enough capital, yet refugees, they're using the smallest money. You can't compete with someone who's using 1 million Uganda shillings, yet they have 100 shillings. That's the challenge. Then others, some of them, they like to train somewhere. Where is Evans? There is a young lady here, she called Evans. She's a student in Oxford University. I hope this year she was with me to try to do the connection in such hotels where they have many tourists, that refugees, they can go there and just train those people who come to visit Uganda how to make necklaces, also to have some smaller exhibitions there. We try, but as I say, we still have challenges of capacity and the startup.
And I think that builds on the question here of, your students have a certificate, and yet they can't go and start their business because, one, lack of capital, or two, there's regulations. So what is the value of the certificate?
The certificate, let's use this word. So on one hand, you can say certificate is, let's say it is useless. If you don't using it, it is useless. But it is the confirmation that you have trained in ABCD. That is it. The one confirmation, because now in Uganda, some NGOs, if you go to ask maybe the support, they say, you say, I am doing art and the craft. Where did you learn it? From GLIS Uganda. Also, whenever, refugees they're in Uganda, in country of asylum, but maybe if they get like the third country, they are free to show what they do. I think so. If I come in UK, I say I'm doing art and the craft, and they don't show that they have a certificate, you can't believe me, or you can't give me that. You can believe, but not enough to give me that opportunity to access again or to improve my art. That is the confirmation that they pass me just in art and the craft.
Perfect. And sorry, I'm cutting you off, but because we started 20 minutes late, I want to listen for you for 20 more hours. So. The last question about equity, access in relationship to technology. You spoke about it, but maybe answering that question directly.
It's a tricky one because it's very difficult. Obviously, like as Jackie said, when you have more refugees and less money, it's difficult to reach, even to provide the basic services of food, etc. I think it's an even more reason to try and change the way you're doing things and improve. When you're in the corporate sector, it's live or die. If you don't change and if you don't try and become better, it's not going to work. In terms of reaching out to every school, we're trying to do with what we have. So we have a certain amount of budget. I wish we could provide every school in every refugee camp, and ultimately, we have a goal by 2020 to really roll out that program at scale. But we're limited in terms of resources. That's why we're trying to find innovative ways of delivering the program, including creating a box that can go out to other schools, or including people from other schools in the training that we're providing on the ground. So it means that sometimes we end up with 60 people in the room instead of 20. But it also means that while we're there, we try and do a bit more to provide better access. But
So
there are some limitations. I can't give you a straight answer and say, if I told you that we're going to reach everyone, and it would be, I'd be lying. So.
All right, so the last question to wrap it up, because there was a promise of talking about innovative financing. Very quick, I want a number. How much money does it cost for an idea box, unit cost?
At the moment?
Yep.
50,000.
Okay. How much does Instant Network Classroom, on average, starting?
The box?
I guess so.
So the box is about $10,000.
Okay.
And an Instant Network Classroom, I would say, to set up is about 50,000.
Okay.
Including the running costs for 1 year.
Okay.
So setup costs, running costs, etc.
And I'm coming to you. The 2.2 desk, how much does that cost?
I actually don't know. I was trying to.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. And then how much does it cost to give a grant, a startup grant? The business, so after they get their training, you said they receive a small grant. How much money is that?
Okay, by now, they started by in Uganda shillings, it is 500 Uganda shillings, it is like $100, 150 something, which is...
I'm not a currency expert. About $200. Okay. So what I'm hearing is that these are big costs, small costs, but they're actually manageable. And one thing that I actually wanted to just flag just very briefly is there is already cash going into these communities. And what we've learned in terms of remittances, it's 3 times the amount of the global aid budget being sent from families to families around the world. The question is, how can we rethink the transaction fees of those remittances if they can actually be reduced if you can prove that they're being used for educational purposes? So I just want to say there's $440 billion being transacted every year through remittances. For these kind of funding questions, that is a ton of new currency and new economy that we need to be thinking about how to actually relate our innovative thinking in terms of product, process, organization, and market, but also where are we getting that money from? So I'm just flagging that because there's going to be a couple of pilots coming up in the next few months with the Education Above All Foundation on that, in which we're partnering with a money transfer company to be announced soon, in which if a family can prove that they are going to use the money for an educational expense, that could be buying more food for the family. It doesn't necessarily have to be a uniform. These pressure points of enrollment times, that transaction fee will reduce by a certain percentage. So it'll be the most competitive rate on the market. of that percentage that is collected in that transaction fee, the money transfer company has decided to donate a portion of that to a foundation that will then provide out-of-school kids that don't have a remittance network. So you see a generation of new funds, but you also see a new incentive for getting those kind of different funding for very different projects. I just wanted to flag that because I think that's really interesting. It is my job and privilege to thank the panel and thank those who have hosted and organized the panel, and thank you, the audience. It's been a tremendous range of issues, but hopefully this is just the spark of a few more conversations over the next couple of days. So thank you, Eugenie, thank you, Jackie, and thank you, Oshin, very, very much.